So Donald Trump had this statement today.
So I'm looking at the whole Gaza Strip right now, and it's a mess. It's a real mess.
So you'd like Jordan to house people from
I'd
Gaza?
like him to take people. I'd like Egypt to take people. I'm talking to General El-Sisi tomorrow, sometime I believe. And I'd like Egypt to take people, and I'd like Jordan to take people. You're talking about probably 1.5 million people, and we just clean out that whole thing. It's it's over the centuries. It's had many conflicts that site, and I don't know. It's something has to happen, but it's literally a demolition site right now. Almost everything's demolished, and people are dying there. So I'd rather get involved with some of the Arab nations and build housing at a different location where they can maybe live in peace.
Okay, so that was Donald Trump and the statement that he made in relation to Gaza. First and foremost, without any kind of connection to Donald Trump and the US and Israel, this statement on its own is a massive indication of how much of a racist and supremacist person says it. The fact that they are completely disregarding the people of Gaza. All of it is destruction. Destruction on what, people? Destruction. There are buildings collapsing on people. Over 50,000 martyrs, 14,000 under the rubble. Israel burnt people alive under houses. Complete disregard to human life. And the complete disregard of human life in Gaza is something that we have seen repeatedly from Western leaders in the past 15 months. And Donald Trump is continuing that heritage. He has no regard whatsoever for the suffering of the Palestinian people, viewing Gaza as what exactly? As properties and buildings. These are the people in Gaza. Here they are. The women and children with destruction fleeing from one place to another. Those who were fortunate not to have their houses exploded on top of their heads. These are the people who Donald Trump is talking about. So this complete disregard shows who's actually speaking. A morally bankrupt individual with heaps of arrogance and supremacy and racism against people and their lives. In particular, the Palestinian people in Gaza. That's number one. Number two, why is Donald Trump saying that now? We had this proposal before. This proposal came on the table, by the way, in a time where it had more potential of success in the beginning. Many people were still ignorant about Israel and its atrocities and its genocide and the fact that it's a state of terror. And they were also ignorant about the Palestinian cause. Many people were. And at the time, it was something that you could potentially, get away with. But even then, back in October 2023, the Egyptian president himself, who has very good ties with the United States, peace treaty with Israel, he said no, outright, not going to happen, despite pressure coming from Antony Blinken multiple times. And at the time, the meeting between him and Blinken was recorded against the usual protocols as well to show the position of Egypt when it comes to the ethnic cleansing of Gaza. And against all pressure coming from Western countries who were constantly pushing the narrative. Oh yeah, open the borders, let's let the people out, like we did to the Syrian people. But in Gaza, they could have done it relatively quickly. And the initial bombardment of Israel from the north down to the south, the intention and purpose behind it was to force people down to the south of Gaza, the most southern part of Gaza, the Rafah border and the Philadelphia corridor, and then expel them to Egypt. And then later from Egypt to other countries potentially and whatever, but Egypt would bear the biggest burden. That would set a precedent for another move such as this in the West Bank. Israel has a plan for the West Bank. They also want to ethnically cleanse the Palestinians of the West Bank. Why? So they can have what they call a Jewish demographic superiority between the Jordan River and the sea. Because since 2015, Israel lost to the Jewish majority between the Jordan River to the sea. It has been majority Palestinian civilians between the Jordan River to the sea. If we talk about the West Bank, East Jerusalem, Gaza, and 1948 occupied territories, let alone the fact that millions of Israelis fled the country in the past 2 years following the judicial reform and following the Battle of Al-Aqsa flood and the genocide in Gaza. So if they failed before, what makes Donald Trump think that something might change now? Both Egypt and Jordan, by the way, rejected it outright. And from an Egyptian, Jordan said, the Jordanian foreign minister, Ayman al-Safadi, he said any population transfer would be a declaration of war against Jordan. And again, Jordan, another country with a peace treaty with Israel. Egypt said they would want to expel the Palestinians to us so that they can have an excuse to attack Egypt as a whole. And that's also, again, accurate. Egypt has, Israel, they have plans when it comes to Egypt to occupy parts of Sinai and potentially the whole of Egypt, which is a very important country. And at the time, the Egyptian president, he proposed that, well, these people are refugees from, occupied Palestine in different words, but he said, open the Negev desert for them, Sahara and Naqab. You can keep them there up until you finish fighting with Hamas, if that's what you're saying. And then if you want, bring them back to Gaza. From that moment, many people in the leading establishment in Israel, in the political echelon, they started to have these campaigns against Egypt. Egypt is part of the problem. Smotrich said Egypt bears responsibility for the 7th of October. There was a big frustration, especially with the persistence of Egypt. It wasn't only talk. Egypt took actions. They had some of the biggest drills in South Sinai, and they also deployed unprecedented numbers of forces all across the peninsula, all across the Sinai Peninsula, when it comes to equipment, machinery, arms, special units, and at the top of it, the defense minister, I believe it was one of the most senior figures in the Egyptian army, he visited the border with Gaza, the Philadelphia corridor. And he was asked as well in a recent interview, like this forces, this deployment, said this is our country and we are at liberty to do everything. Although this is technically a breach of the Camp David Accords that Israel has with Egypt. Again, why is Trump saying that now? Is Trump saying that to this, regardless of the abhorrent act itself and how inhumane it is, how racist it is, and people who can't view how racist it is should open their eyes, by the way. The disregard of human life in Gaza is one of the biggest problems that we faced from Western politicians, Western leaders, Western mainstream media, complete disregard of human life. They talk about Gaza as if it's like nothing, a human life as if they're nothing. And no talk, everything froze when it comes to human rights, when it comes to women's rights, when it comes to children's rights, when it comes to all of these organizations, even when it comes to animal rights. Despite that, and that's very important to mention, by the way, Donald Trump still mentioned that. Why did he mention it? And all of a sudden he's getting, getting back some of the support from the extreme right wing in Israel. All of a sudden, after they said he cheated us and he backstabbed us, when Steve Witkoff said that this hell that we're talking about also includes Israel. It could be a move coming from Trump to try and keep the balance between his relations with his backers, Track APAC just released a figure not long ago that I posted. Donald Trump received in total approximately $250 million from the Zionist lobby inside of the United States, 100 million of which from Miriam Adelson. Her late husband, Sheldon Adelson, he was a prominent supporter of Benjamin Netanyahu and some of his mouthpieces inside of Israel. Okay. Is it relevant? Is it relevant? Is the United States going to do something to ethnically cleanse the population in Gaza? Well, the statement on its own is something, even if the United States itself doesn't have a plan to go and participate to enforce this ethnic cleansing. Yes, some US security companies, well, members of a security company led by Egypt are going to be working in the Netzarim corridor. Steve Witkoff is due to visit. He said he will be visiting Netzarim and the Philadelphia corridor to ensure the safe passage of Palestinians, make sure they don't have weapons, this and that. Okay, these people cannot do anything. What are they going to do to the Palestinians? Plus, this was coordinated with the Palestinian resistance too. No one can defeat Gaza. The people need to understand that very well. But they're trying to apply pressure on people, and Donald Trump is siding with the far right religious Zionists inside of Israel. With that, alongside any Zionist base or remnants of that Zionist base, but predominantly the Zionist lobby inside of the United States. Will he be able to be successful with any campaign? Of course not. Of course not. The Palestinians in Gaza, they've shown the whole world that they're not going to be withdrawing from anywhere, and they're going to be returning to their homes. They're going to be returning to their homes. And even with the latest problem that happened in the latest round of prisoner exchange between the Palestinians and Israel, that's also headed towards a solution. So what happened exactly? There was a female soldier called Ariel Yehud, who Israel said we expect her to be released, although in accordance with the agreement between Hamas and the resistance and Israel, the resistance is supposed to release 4 Israeli female soldiers on Saturday, and they have. So what do we have? A violation from Israel, a breach from Israel. Not surprising whatsoever. But they used this breach to blame Hamas, saying that we expected her, and therefore we're going to still block the Netzarim corridor, although thousands of Palestinians were waiting to enter because they were told they're going to enter, but Israel kept it close, and many people are sleeping in the streets near the Netzarim corridor that Israel is still controlling. The Israeli terror army is still controlling inside of Gaza, that they're due to, by the way, withdraw from, temporarily be replaced by the Egyptian-led multinational force, later for a complete withdrawal. Israel also, there were reports that 1 or 2 were martyred as well, and several were wounded after Israel had fired gunshots. However, there were talks today because Hamas made statements that we did not breach anything with the agreement. We told the Israelis that this woman is alive and that she will be released on Saturday. But there have been intense talks to try and move something forward, potentially during the weekend before Saturday, to release that woman in return for the release of Palestinian prisoners with life sentences, because we're talking about a female soldier, and the return to allow the people to return to the north from the south, not those who are internally displaced in the north, those already returned. What happened? Well, there was a negotiation round today in Qatar. The communication is still ongoing, but the talks were intense. There were reports that we're close to a solution when it comes to that. Hamas was insisting on not tying the return to the north from the south, as it's connected to the release of 4 soldiers, they said, and we have. This is what happened on Saturday, they said. And they said also it's an obstacle created by Israel. However, there were talks. Hamas confirmed that she's alive. And there were they're saying that there's a potential of her being released potentially before Saturday, which is unlike what's been happening so far during the release, Knox, so that Israel can open the corridor, but also release at least 30 Palestinian prisoners who have life sentences. That means Palestinians who participated in action against the state of Israel, or they could have killed a few people or what have you. Now, there was another thing. There was another reason why Israel also created this problem and had this violation. Israel complained to the mediators that they don't want Hamas to be releasing their prisoners of war in the way they did, because these images, these videos are very strong and they're very telling, and they debunk the whole lying propaganda machine. Okay. They didn't want the Palestinians to achieve another image of victory by returning in their thousands to the north from the south. They've already faced problems with people internally displaced from the north returning. They didn't want that. They want to delay it as much as possible. And by the way, this whole multi-phase agreement, this whole delay in progress is primarily to delay all of the scenes of victory coming from the Palestinian side. But despite that, it's proving to be having the opposite effect. Why? Because instead of seeing a scene of victory all at once, the world is seeing multiple scenes of victory every single week. Stupidity from Israel, absolute stupidity, like their stupidity since the beginning of this whole campaign and since their inception. Counterproductive. If you didn't want them to, well, the people are seeing every single week images of victory coming from Gaza, right? Why do you want to delay it? Why do you want to make it multi-phased? And although the government had internal pressure, by the way, they had internal pressure from the primarily prisoners, families of the Israeli prisoners in Gaza, saying that, no, let's have one knock, release everyone in return for everyone from our prisons too. But again, that would be a big image of victory for the Palestinian side. And Israel didn't want the Israeli government, basically. They did not want to completely shock the Israeli public, who are the first victims of Israel. The first victims of Zionism are the Israelis inside of Israel, the first victims of the propaganda, the first victims of the brainwashing, the first victims of the cult mentality, the first victims of the cannon fodder machine chewing their children up for completely pointless acts of terror in the name of their state and their religion and what have you. But nothing has been concluded yet. And although nothing has been concluded yet when it comes to that release happening before Saturday, the vibes are positive. So this woman could potentially be released, and we could be seeing a round before Saturday, during which this woman, Ariel Ehud, will be released, the Israeli soldier, in return for 30 Palestinians with life sentences, and to open the Netzarim corridor for the Palestinians returned by foot to the north. And again, that might correlate, that might come simultaneously with the US and Egyptian and Qatari, reports that Qatar as well, presence in the Netzarim corridor. Moving on to the next thing that I wanted to talk to you about. Today, we witnessed some magnificent scenes of the brave Lebanese people returning to the south. Today marked the end of the 60th day, which was the deadline for Israel to withdraw. Israel said, we will not be withdrawing. Multiple attempts have been made by Israel to try and, have an additional extension. Clearly, that was not successful. That was not successful because the people were returning. The people were returning to the north, to the south, of Lebanon. And there were many videos and scenes published. This was one of them here. people going back, even raising Hezbollah flags as well. That's an Israeli vehicle ahead. But it came as a cost. It came as a cost. There were reports that 24 were martyred and over 120 were wounded, trying to go back to their homes, but prevented by this state of terror. And there were other images as well of, not only the people, but also the Lebanese army. And I'm going to talk about the villages, which parts, and what happened. The things were very interesting in Lebanon today. Here, this was a very interesting image that came from Lebanon, but the Lebanese army actually providing cover for the civilians returning to Mais el-Jabal. This was one of the villages that Israel still had presence in, South Lebanon. The Lebanese army was seen protecting the people, giving them cover to go back. And also there were videos and images of Lebanese army tanks going back to some of those villages where Israel is present in, despite Israel claiming that they are not going to leave. There were also scenes of unity as well. So the southern part of Lebanon is a majority Shia population. However, both Shia and Sunni people were praying together when they were returning back to the south of Lebanon. Excuse me if I said north, I meant South Lebanon. They were praying together, scenes of national unity, support, common cause of those people to go back to the south of Lebanon. Some also, people who were returning back to the north, were challenging Israel. Like one of them was this kid here, this young man, who saw an Israeli tank and he decided to go next to the Israeli tank. He was recording the Israeli tank. Look at this Israeli terror tank next to him. Look, he's pointing at him. And he's just recording him and basically giving him the finger. Although they deserve more than that. And one of the most significant scenes that came from South Lebanon today is this woman.
الله أكبر يا الله أكبر عليه أعطيه تحية من عندك عليه تحية شهيد.
And there was someone who said that, and they also said that someone was also killed by Israel. He was martyred. But again, this image really speaks volumes. Woman standing against a tank. This is the ultimate representation of what the people in the Levant of Ard al-Sham face with this barbaric state of terror. People versus tanks. This is the ultimate representation. And this woman, with all heroism and bravery, going to confront a tank, like all of the Lebanese people who were seen going back to the south despite this state of terror, committing a genocide in Lebanon, trying to prevent them from that. That also brought results. There were results coming from these actions. What are these results? Well, at one point today, I'm going to share this map with you. You see this map? This is the map of some of the villages that Israel occupies in South Lebanon. The ones in blue, the ones in blue and red, altogether, they had Israeli presence up until yesterday. The ones in blue had people returning to them, with many of them seeing Israeli withdrawal. That was in the middle of the day. What happened later on during the day? Look at what happened later on during the day. We started to have this. Look at how many people returned to the majority of them, including these areas here. عيترون, ميس الجبل, حولة, عيت الشعب, بنت جبال, all of these areas. That means the people went back despite Israeli presence, and Israeli terror forces started to withdraw from these areas too. So in effect, today we saw a magnificent scene in South Lebanon of people defeating the army. The people of Lebanon, women, children, defeating the army. And again, they paid the price. It wasn't without a price. 22 martyrs, including 9 children, 124 wounded, with the masses of people going back. And they were like, no one's going to stop us. No one is going to stop us. And they continue to go down south. Now, these images from Lebanon are very significant. They're significant because Hezbollah, the Lebanese armed resistance, led primarily by Hezbollah, they were the ones who started to support Gaza, right? And Lebanon was the biggest country that sacrificed with its people outside of Palestine during this genocide. People need to remember that very well. Thousands of martyrs, the pager attacks, and approximately 1 million displaced, forcibly expelled from their homes, and Israel destroying big parts of Lebanon. But Hezbollah did not participate in anything. They weren't shooting, and it was the people. It was the people, and it was the Lebanese army with the presence of the Lebanese army. Now, this is significant because there were talks throughout this period that we want, Hezbollah shouldn't really be the only side in Lebanon confronting. We need to create a new equation. We need to potentially have a new resistance of everyone in the south. And of course, there is a big coordination between the Lebanese resistance and the Lebanese army. But the Lebanese army wasn't taking a proactive role in confronting Israel. Today, it showed more participation of the Lebanese army, although there weren't many clashes, but the Lebanese army also lost troops. There were slight exchanges during the past 15 months. Of course, nothing in comparison to what Hezbollah did with Israel. But this is creating a new reality in the south, where the community, the civilians of the south, who are communities supportive of the resistance, many of them family members, they are going back with the protection of the Lebanese army. These scenes today, they bothered many people. They bothered Israel, first and foremost, with limited capabilities to escalate further against these people. Israel did not want to have images of mass murder again, although they're a mass murdering entity, because there's a lot at stake when it comes to the deal, when it comes to the US administration, and when it comes to the fact that they are the ones violating now blatantly, even in front of their biggest supporter, the United States administration. Then the people imposed their will on Israel by returning to their towns and villages. By the way, many of them destroyed. Much of the towns in the south of Lebanon were totally destroyed. Israel was destroying the houses deliberately in the south to make them uninhabitable, like what they've done in Gaza. And people mustn't forget the talks about Israeli settlement and expansion several months back. Don't forget all of that talk. And some religious groups inside of Israel calling the South Lebanon area a biblical area, important to the Jewish people all of a sudden, and that they want to be there. Don't forget, all of that is being shattered. All of that is being shattered by the brave Lebanese people. Judging by what happened today in South Lebanon, it looks like Israel will continue the withdrawal. They have no other option but to, unless they decide to make a move that would take things completely out of control and put them at loggerheads with not only Hezbollah, but potentially the Lebanese army too. And they're going to have more problems with the mediators who are trying to get to a solution. Because although the mediators, they would have loved to see Hezbollah being completely wiped off, they know Hezbollah cannot be defeated like that. Similar to the Palestinian resistance. Everyone would have loved Hamas to be wiped off, even the Palestinian people. And they wouldn't even blink, because we're talking about people who are morally depraved. The leaders supporting the country, supporting Israel, their administrations really, those in power, they're morally bankrupt, depraved completely. They don't care about the lives of the Palestinian people. And of course, compare all of their positions when it comes to Gaza and Lebanon, and compare them with what they do in Ukraine, to look at the heaps of double standards and hypocrisy. But what happened in Lebanon today, and the scenes that we're seeing from Gaza, people returning to the north of Gaza, people in Lebanon returning to the south, all of that indicates that the will of the people of the Levant is victorious over this pariah state of terror. And no matter how much they want to try and shut down this image of victory or have more suppression, no matter how much propaganda they're going to try and put out there, they will not succeed. The people are already there. Some of them in Lebanon already built tents, like Gaza, next to their homes, by the way. When the homes are destroyed, and again, with the rebuilding in Lebanon, it's going to take a long time. Israel was completely destroying houses, not only by airstrikes, but with their forces on the ground. They're planting explosives, destroying whole towns, so that the people have nothing to return to. And we need to understand that the people are returning despite all of that in South Lebanon, similar to what they're doing in Gaza, of course, regardless of the big difference when it comes to Gaza, with more destruction in Gaza.